When someone you care about is struggling with anxiety, it can be difficult. When that someone is your wife, it can be downright overwhelming. We can get lost in what we're supposed to do, and we can go freeze and go internal. Or we can try to help and make it way worse. Hello, my friend. My name's Zach, and I have been trained in anxiety management. So this isn't theory. This works. And today we're going to describe exactly 2 types of anxiety, how to help your bride with it. Let's dive in. The first thing to know is that there's 2 types of anxiety. One is acute anxiety. So that would be a bear is attacking you, right? You don't want to try to stay calm in acute anxiety. It requires action. If a bear is attacking you, you're not going to manage your anxiety as it attacks you. No, you're going to do something about it. Pull the bear spray out and spray the thing. But what happens in chronic anxiety is the body thinks the bear is attacking you, but there's no bear. So you have the same fight, flight, or freeze response, but there's really nothing there. And so when your wife is sharing, really look at it. Is it acute or is it chronic? We're going to discuss how to help her through chronic anxiety. Okay? So here's how we do this. First, chronic anxiety needs someone to walk through it. Here's what I mean by that. You as a helper, the one helping your wife with her anxiousness, you're going to see anxiety rise in her, and you're going to want to stop it. In fact, you might be not so wise enough to say, stop it. Or you might try to stop it through saying, it's not that big a deal. Really, what we're doing in those moments by minimizing the anxiety, minimizing the problem, is we're trying to fix it by shrinking it. Like maybe if I get her to see that it's this big, it'll really help her. It doesn't. It does the exact opposite. So now not only will your wife be anxious about this, but she'll also be mad at you. And that's not a good combo. In fact, I strive in marriage to not have an angry wife. There's that saying, happy wife, happy life. And I really don't like it, but it is true. And so, you don't want to go your whole life trying to appease her, but to harm her, which is shrinking anxiety does, that's not a good way to go either. So we're going to show you the process of how to calm her anxious heart. And you cannot miss a step of this. So please just stay with me through the end, because if you try to shortchange this, it's not going to have the result you want. It's going to be kind of like shrinking that, right? You're going to think you're helping, and now you just have someone that's more spun up and angry with you. It's not a recipe for a good night's sleep. All right, here's what we need to do, number 1. The opposite of shrinking it. You and I need to take our wives' anxiety seriously. As seriously as they do. In fact, that's one of the calmers of anxiety, is for someone to see it and acknowledge that it's a big deal. That feels like, well, wouldn't that make them get more anxious? It won't if you follow the whole process. But let's just say that a friend is angry with them, and your wife struggles for people to be angry with them. And that's what makes them anxious. That's one of the things that makes me anxious. And so if you take it seriously and talk about how hard that must be, that will help. But here's the thing we need to start with. Not only are we going to take it seriously, but we're going to monitor ourselves. You might be like, what? Monitor myself? She's the one that's anxious. But here's what happens. Chronic anxiety is different from acute anxiety in some major ways. It's not just that there's no bear compared to bear. It's also acute anxiety can't spread. If someone gets in a car wreck, in the middle of that car wreck, Their heartbeat's going to go up. They're going to get spinning mind. They're going to get all this stuff's going to happen in that moment. That's acute anxiety, right? If you're not in the car with them, you can't have that anxiety experience. It's not acute. There's nothing happening, but chronic anxiety can. Have you ever had someone share a moment and it got you anxious? Like there was that movie recently, I forget what it's called, Sound of Freedom, I think, where it was talking about trafficking of young girls. That made me anxious. That spread to me because I have young daughters. And I saw this movie and it spiked my anxiety. Anxiety spreads. So if your wife is anxious, you are getting anxious. I know that's wild, but you know when I talked earlier about that temptation to shrink it down, not big a deal, that's actually an anxiety response in us as guys. That's us going, woo, I don't like that. Stop it. Shrink it. Shrink it so we can have a good night, please. Right? That is us going into that fight, flight, or freeze. And here's how you can tell if you're getting anxious. You might get a tightening body. Like, have you ever had your children, if you have them, act up at home and all of a sudden you get really tense? That's anxiety taking over your body. Like tightening body. Mine happens with a clenched jaw and a tight back. And if you ever like, man, I need a back massage, that's because you've been walking in anxiety and you weren't aware of it. Or your teeth all of a sudden hurt. That's what happens to me. And I realize, oh, I'm trying to ground my teeth down. No, I'm in anxiety because my tightening body. Or you might have spinning mind. That's another sign. So this is you're thinking about the problem and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I'm going to think my way out of this so hard. That's anxiety. If you're problem solving for like 20 minutes, you're not problem solving. That's anxiety has come in and you're trying to find the perfect answer. Or the last one, racing heart. So this is that your heartbeat increases. Like, have you had that? Like, I remember I used to play football and basketball in high school, and before the big game, before I would go in, my heart would be pounding a million miles. That's anxiousness. Luckily, you go out there and do stuff, and it calms you. But that's just to notice that you're getting anxious. So that's the first step in calming yourself so that you can be there for her. The next step is to name as concretely as possible what's making you anxious. You know, when my wife is sharing her anxious thoughts with me, I can get anxious for a few different reasons. And so see if any of these ring true for you. If she's anxious about finances, well, sometimes I can get anxiety because I feel like I've failed. Like, if I would provide more, then she would be fine, but I'm not. And so I feel responsible. Or she gets anxious and I really want to be approved by my wife. And so that makes me anxious. Or I want the perfect answer to give her to make it go away. And that makes me anxious. Or there's nothing I can do about it because someone's being a jerk at her work and I can't do anything about that. And that makes me anxious. Sometimes it's that my kids have upset her. And that makes me anxious. There's so many reasons that I can get anxious myself with my wife sharing, but usually it's all to do with me and what I perceive I did or did not do. And so naming it as concretely as possible helps reduce the anxiety. Here's the thing, there's certain areas that I get more anxious. And for me, my big time anxiety is when my wife is dreaming about things she wants. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but it makes me anxious because I feel like I need to go make it happen. And I don't see how I'm going to do it. And so that one is big enough to where noticing and naming, honestly, a lot of times does not work for me. So I had to do the third step in reducing my anxiety and staying calm myself. And that's to diffuse. And you can diffuse anxiety in 3 different ways. You can go to a place that fills you up. So writing down different places that fill you up. One of them is nature, going for a walk in the woods. The other one's my home. My home can be an anxiety reducer for me. For you, it might be being in the city. If you're an extrovert, being around a bunch of people might be beneficial to you. So going to the mall, just to look at it. What fills you up? What places? And then who are people that fill you up? Hopefully your wife fills you up, but if you're trying to help her with her anxiety, you got to have more resources, more people than her. And so that's where a good community of friends can be beneficial. Or you can go be with them. And then what are some activities that fill you up? I like to hike, fly fish, hunt. I like listening to worship music, reading my Bible, praying. Those are all things that reduce my anxiety. So if it's a big one for you, if there's one that you try to notice and you try to name it, and that's still not reducing your anxiety, just tell your wife that you just give me a second and go do something that fills you up. All right? Staying calm yourself out of the steps is the hardest work. And it takes diligence of just noticing and naming. So if you've noticed it and you've named it and you're still not calming your heart and mind, please just go diffuse. It's better than saying something you're going to regret. All right, third thing, listen. That sounds simple. It is not, because of our anxiety. And so when you are noticing and naming, you're still going to be tempted to not listen. You're going to be tempted to fix. And we fix through finding solutions for them that they should do. Or you're going to be tempted to rescue. Listen, I know you and me, we like to be that knight, riding in on the stallion, saving the day. And so we want to rescue our bride. But I want to remind you of the goal that we talked about in the beginning, was to walk with them through it. It is not to fix the problem for them, and it is not to rescue them from it. Because neither one of those work. But instead we listen. See, and so you're going to want to listen to understand. So you're taking it seriously. And if you're taking it seriously, you're staying calm yourself, and you're listening to understand, you're going to want to ask some curious questions. So when she's sharing, let curiosity guide you in understanding what she's saying. A non-curious question would be, why does that bug you? I'm not saying that. That is not the right type of curiosity. The right type of curiosity is getting to the bottom of what she's sharing. When we say, why does that bug you? That's not listening, that's judgment in the form of a question. Because we're inferring to them that it shouldn't bug them, that somehow they should be okay with it. But if we could say, man, I know that must be tough, taking it seriously, to feel, and whatever you figured out, did I get that right? That you are being curious in, am I establishing what's bugging you here? See, here's how you're helping them by listening in that way and being curious. You're helping them to notice their anxiety and name it. You're not telling them to notice and name their anxiousness, but you're guiding them through it. You're being a listening ear. And the cool thing about anxiety is that it spreads. Like, that's a non-cool thing, but it's cool. Like, that's interesting, isn't it? That it spreads. Have you ever watched a group of people go from one person get anxious to like the whole group all of a sudden is anxious? You can see this at a Thanksgiving dinner amongst family. Like, the one person decides to bring up politics and everyone around the table disagrees, and you're like, you watch the whole tension rise. It never happens at my family dinners. So those things happen, right? But the cool thing is, have you ever seen how one calm person changes the whole room to a bunch of calm people? And that's what you can do for your bride. See, When we stay calm and take it serious and listen, and we're just being curious, but we're noticing, helping them to notice and name, and we're staying calm ourselves, she will reduce in her anxiety. And that, my friend, is how we help them. But listening, true listening, is a skill. So if you want to grow in that, and please, if you want to help your anxious wife, you need to grow in it. Watch this video right here. I know it'll really help you listen so that you can fully understand how she's feeling.